we'll just start here. I think actually the obvious team to start with. Normally I saved them on all the past seasons. You'll notice that I've always saved G2 till the end because they were just always winning. It was the obvious team that at the end you just glaze and you just say what they're good at, who had a good week and who didn't. And it was more like, if anything, the weekly thing was sort of like, can anyone beat them? Or like, is there actually anything they're not good at? Like now, obviously we can have like a real convo about this team because they've done this big bold move when they've taken out the support jungle duo. By the way, that's no mean feat when one of them you kick it out the doors, Mickey X, like one of like generational players. So you brought in Labrov, who admittedly, yes, had a wonderful year last year on BDS, was certainly a key player there, was also very good in the first split, so people remember. But you've also brought in this Skewbon guy, who if people don't know, is sort of hyped like Callista's ADC, but at jungle. He was the guy from BDS Academy. Everyone was apparently slavering over all the scrims last year, and it was just guaranteed he was going to end up on some big name team, right? Obviously, they started 1 and 2 Nymera, and actually one of their games was mega fucking sus. So where are you at initially on G2? Where are we starting this thing?
Well, I mean, as you said, changing jungle support is kind of that's kind of the no-no for big teams. Jungle support is the thing I would want to keep if I want to keep a style with a team, a macro and early game with a team. So that was always going to be very difficult. And just backtracking to something you just said in terms of like keeping track of players through random ERLs. This is just a quick tangent because I find this really funny. So there are a bunch of players in LEC from ERLs, which I cast a couple of years ago, and this has got its own unique problem. Because I now remember these players from like 2022.
All right.
Or in the case of Skewmond, I cast this guy in one of his first competitive ever splits, in one of my first ever paid casting gigs on UK LC, which was the tier below NLC.
How long ago was this?
This was 2021. So this was like, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to put things into perspective because, like, obviously I've not been around as long as some casters, but this was, like, still quite a long time ago for that. And by the way, he still was a Nunu one trick even back then.
All right.
He was, like, on Enclave, if I remember, a team which is now defunct, which was, like, mid-tier UKLC, and this guy was, like, decent as a player, but I have, like, some vague memories of that. I heard some good stuff about him when he was in different ERLs to the ones which I was covering, and now suddenly he's in the fucking LEC on G2 as the most hyped jungler. So for me, I actually have a unique problem for that of remembering them before they kind of went through their development arc, and now I'm seeing them with a couple of years out there. So I've kind of got a load of pieces I've got to put together for them. Like I did cover a bit of Emir Masters just because I try and keep up with the LEC players, but the consensus on this guy was that he was massive team player, played through lanes, very vocal, very energetic and great for a team atmosphere, and G2 very much wanted him, but a lot of teams wanted him because he was on the EMEA Masters winning team. Was he BDS Academy?
Yep.
Yeah, so this guy was like super hyped. But at the end of the day, changing jungle support is not an easy thing. In LPL, in fact, the super teams which have succeeded are the ones which kept their jungle support together, typically. You know, the JDG super team kept their jungle support together, and they brought in Knight, and they brought in Ruler, and whatever. Those bits are more plug and play. Plugging in a jungler is very difficult, so it doesn't surprise me that there are teething issues for G2. Now there has to be a point, though, where any view about G2 has to be in the scope of these are still best of ones just after a team has formed.
Sure, and it's Fearless Draft. Throw that in as well, you know.
Well, Fearless Draft will come later, but for best ones, I'm just like, who gives a damn for that for now?
Oh, true, yeah, obviously, that doesn't apply yet, of course. Yes.
So that doesn't apply yet, but the big thing is also that if you're trying to then kind of float on just mechanics from laning phase of your 3 kind of remaining members and also their instincts do not apply for this goddamn new objective Atakan, which is in a completely different way. Because I think we're...
which is going to change macro forever, right? It's not just some side... I don't think people realise this is even more impactful than the Grobs, potentially.
Hugely so, and the way you fight about it is completely different to anything else that's thought about in League. So as we're coming up to this like next LEC weekend, it's a big topic which I want to bring onto the broadcast there as well, which is you are not fighting in a pit for once. You're not fighting in a dragon pit. You're not fighting in a baron pit. And like imagine if you're an attack shooter and suddenly just the site is just like completely open with like something like that. You don't have to. You're not playing suddenly around. These defensive walls which can either pin you into it or you can fire over them if you're very long range or artillery or something like that. It's completely different. And I think that really played into their loss against BDS, where they went to Atakan with a huge early game gold lead. And for some reason, they're just brains turned off. I don't know whether it's just because their instincts are off. They pile into the tri-brush or try to because they're looking for an engage onto the Varus, I assume, and they get just absolutely destroyed by a shockwave. They lose Atakan and they lose the game. So instincts there are in place yet. You're still in week 1 with best of ones, and you've replaced the macro and early game powerhouse of your team. So as what I would love to make the clickbaity, crazy takes about G2, but realistically, we haven't seen enough about them. And also, Dylan Falco just put out an interview as well. I think it was with Sheepy.
Yep, it was.
Just saying that, well, we're still feeling okay. And from what I've also heard from internal team as well, they're still happy with the changes that they made to the roster. That seems to be the prevailing opinion. So I'm willing to give them another week or two and just say, well, make it to playoffs and show us what you can do in Fearless Draft. So that's kind of like the overarching stuff. I suppose on individual players, Caps is still Caps. That's a good thing, and shows that if you give him the most powerful champions in the patch on something like Victor, it goes away with a pentakill. So yeah, I mean, the warning sirens aren't there for me on G2 just yet. If it's another week and things look really bad and they don't make playoffs because they've dropped too many games, then obviously, yes, that's awful for a team that won the Grand Slam of LEC titles last year. But there's a lot of extenuating circumstances for the team.
I don't think, actually, since they kept the 3 carries, that they can actually be bad Nightmare. Like, to me, even if, like, even if the jungle mid doesn't work or it's not the perfect in the split ward or the shot calling issues, like, obviously an issue they could have gambled on here is maybe they've given up some of the macro angles, who knows? Like, even if that's the case, they just have too many good players and Caps, as you say. So to me, at a minimum, they have to at least be obviously a playoff team and probably, like, at minimum a dark horse for the league, if not just a true contender. Like, it's not like the other teams have been that insane, but I will say
it's already weird that they're not the favourites because we know them to be G2, but they should still be in the upper echelons.
Yeah, put it this way, bear in mind the only team that 3-0 is Giant X. Like, shut the fuck up, anyone telling me they're number 1. Again, on a power ranking, yeah, they'd have to be number 1, but that is not the same as who, if I put a gun to your head and said bet all your life savings now, you'd probably revert to G2 and assume Ansama and Caps do some shit, wouldn't you? So, but here's the problem. I actually do think people have undervalued what a tough spot G2 was in Nightmare, because since as that campaign that they did in Berlin or whatever with all those posts like no one's perfect because they lost one split in like 2 years, right? In theory, the logic should go, run it back a 3rd year. But actually, if anything, that's only something that makes sense appealing-wise after the 1st year, because most teams do only have the 5-man light for the 1 year. So after the 1st year, it's true. You look at that and you go, hey, you know what? In spring coming in MSI, we were pretty fucking sick, actually. We sort of leading the meta in the world, even maybe. Hey, maybe we run it back again and we work on some other things and we build some things out. That wouldn't have been the case the 3rd time around. If anything, by the way, it was diminishing returns last year. They were actually, even though they won all the LECs, they were worse. I mean, the joke was, at the end of that year, no one said, wow, G2 was dope. They were like, everyone except G2 was absolute shit.
That was, change,
everyone just flamed the whole league. It's why the whole league had like this like Rome is fucking falling vibe around LEC.
Yeah, there is, and for, you know, we've watched a lot of league at this point. You know, my first split really watching was 2014, but I've been back since that at like 2013. I've gone back and I've done my history and I've done my checks on that. Back then, it was a miracle to see teams stick together for more than like 1 year. Like, the fact that we've got teams maybe even sticking together for 3 when they're top of the league, that it just did not happen back then. Like, getting 2 years out of and getting 2 good years out of a roster like that is already pretty good. And I completely understand why it's changed for the sake of change. There is a bit of a funny kind of parallel between Yike and Skimon, though. I use the Simpsons scene as an allegory for it, because it just feels like they have a scene for everything. There's one bit where there's Holmes choosing between a prize between you can have a yacht or you can have what's in the box.
Oh, it's Monty's favorite example. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you can have Yike, or you can have this ERL jungler, which might end up being Yike and Skewmond. There was a little bit of that in the back of my head, where like you're just taking another gamble on a kind of a like for like upgrade from ERL. You know, the most hyped ERL jungler, and putting them up into pro play. I am hoping that he can fix some of their kind of because it seemed to be that Yike wasn't the most talkative person in game on G2. I think it's quite hard to do that on G2 because they've got so many big names which determine the game. But that was always going to be a little bit of a roll of the dice. I hope that Skewmon kind of gets his stuff together. There was that one bit after the BDS game where he came out again and his head was in his hands and he looked like he was mentally a bit done. So I hope that's not going to be too severe, because if mentally he's already kind of struggling with that, it's not going to get easier if they lose another game, especially so like a mid-table team.
They also obviously had the problem, like the double problem, that even though, yes, they were winning all the LECs, they didn't actually do anything internationally. People forget this. Okay, yes, they beat Top Esports.
This is SKT, which they couldn't close
They
out
beat
again.
Top Esports when Top Esports played their absolute worst of the entire year. And then they had that thing which Team Liquid lived off last year of like, we almost beat someone. It's like, unfortunately, almost doesn't actually go in a trophy cabinet, guys. As my friend Moses from CS from America said, almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. You think about that idiom. It's actually a banger if you think about it, quite literally. So one of the things is, obviously, as you say, you had to change something. And if you look at the squad, look, I am a dedicated, I'll joke here, I'm a dedicated Broken Blade hater. Maybe I would have said maybe you gamble on Irrelevant for Brook, one of those moves. But assuming you look at it, and let's be real, he was still one of the best top laners the whole time. He had times when he was actually the person even in the draft who was cycling through stuff.
And if you want to do stuff internationally, his international games.
He's also leveled up a lot over the years. And then you look, nobody can cut Hans Hammer and Caps. I'm sorry, guys. At that point in time, even if you were me and you think Upset's better than Hans Hammer, it's like, it's a fucking sideways at best, and you haven't worked with him, so how do you know it would work? So to me, the ones you would obviously change is, look, Mickey X inted the most, so that one just seems easy, and I'll just infer this myself, I can't know, but I'm going to guess it's possible Hans Hammer also just decided, I'd like to try like Labrov, or I'd like to move on to another person. He obviously played all those years with Mickey, it's not like they hadn't had enough experience. And then the jungle angle, I always thought Yike was actually at the end slightly hard done by, because he actually was generally never ever bad in this team. He was always good. He had splits where he was very good. He even actually played pretty well at Worlds in some of the games. It's just his problem was, and this really is the issue, everyone did the modelling, the characterisation when he came into G2 of like, it's this up-and-coming young... He wasn't. He was already like 23 years old, if you don't know, guys, and he played for a million years.
He was like an absolute stud in the year.
And by the way, he was good,
clearly LEC,
but the problem is, if you look at all these players... The odds that he gets like 20% better now, it's just not really going to happen, is it? You're sort of a known quantity. So in this scenario, you have gambled, but you are, hey, I'll tell you what, if you're going to gamble, swing for the fences. If someone tells you this is some generational jungle time, then you actually hope he is the next Yanko. So you just say, fuck it. We already did the Ike thing. Look, remember, they did have a lot of international tournaments as well. People forget that. They had plenty of chances. And as we're saying, the best they got was like, moral victories and stuff. And they needed real victories. They needed real top eights. And to beat T1 even one time, by the way, would have been so big. So I can't blame them. In that scenario, it's not like that lineup could complain and go, hey, getting another chance. As we said, they already had more chances than anyone. So in that sense, I'm cool with it. It might not work out yet. I'm a little sceptical myself. I'm just not somebody who's that big a believer in rookies always. But I can see why they roll the dice. Yeah, I don't hate it. And I'm with you, by the way. This isn't when you... If anything, by the way, if you know anything about narratives, guys, this is when you let all the plebs flee and go, oh my God, this guy's better. And then you just go, I think I'll double down and they'll be in the final still down here. And then we just all look smart in like however many weeks from now it is. Sure.
They still have just ridiculous stock value as players. I mean, yeah.
And all the coaching staff, they've all got most of the things that we thought were excellent. Yeah.
I did find I absolutely know he's fishing for like a clip on this, but Gilhoto had an interview.
Listen, he thinks he's on my other show, mate. Hot take point made League of Legends. That would be a banger take on there. It's a pretty mental take, though.
They're not going to make. Yes, G2 aren't going to make worlds after 3 rounds. Now the thing is though, if you view that from the perspective of, and I think everyone is vaguely on this train. The LEC is better than last year. Okay. And the top teams look like they're better than last year. Which, to be honest, when everyone was flaming the LEC last year and all the teams, it's not that hot point.
No.
Make, really. Yeah. I mean, if you think that there are... Wait, how many teams do we get at Worlds now? It's 3, I presume.
I believe it's 3, because in theory, we'd have to have someone like come to the final of like MSI or something ridiculous, so it's not going to happen, probably.
I don't think it's unreasonable to say there are 3 teams that could beat G2. I think there are 3 good teams. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of noise in there, and we'll have.
I mean, I'll put it this way: even to be generous, you could immediately say it's plausible from the rosters that like Movistar and Fnatic could do it. Then just pick one more. Who knows? Maybe BDS. I actually thought they were pretty good this week. Maybe they can get it together. Whoever, the team that you don't expect but gets the shit together. By the way, Carmine Corp. I'm not really a big fan myself, but again, got some pretty good play. Yeah, basically, what you're sort of saying here is it's not like they have to be terrible to not make the top 3. If there's only 3 go, you could be a decent fourth.
G2 not making Worlds last year would have been crimes against all that is good and holy within League of Legends. If they don't make it this year, it's like, actually, I think I can at least see there being teams of a caliber to take them down in important ways. So maybe not the hottest point, I suppose, given that context.
And by the way, for people who don't remember, because one thing that was a nightmare last year is, people kept doing talk shows during the LEC season finals going, so how many points do they cover? It's just a pure bracket! It's just please. But here's the thing, Nymira. I actually think we got lucky because remember G2 got dropped down to low bracket, but luckily they were playing BDS, who were basically their fucking pickup tonic all year long. But I always thought to myself, bro, I'll tell you what, if G2 had somehow lost to BDS and not gone to Worlds, I'm telling you right now, this format would have been changed because it would have been mental to have a team win everything and then just blow it at the very end. Like, even though that, in theory that's fair, that's allowed, I don't think we'd have the same format.
That would have been like the biggest. I'm trying to think the biggest miss of Worlds before that. That would have rivaled Katie Arrow's 2014 winning OGN Summer and then not making Worlds. That it's just up there with.
Yeah. Or maybe the Longzhu that had Khan on it. That was when they bombed it after they won the spring one. There's a couple that have done it, but it's very rare, obviously. Of course. Yes. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.